Do you think I could just introduce myself real quick?
Sure.
Oh, wow. I'm just so the serendipity of this meeting actually happening right now in my life is really cool. So my name is Eric Fletcher, and essentially, a long story short, I live and work in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Um, and I'm also a home barista and a home coffee roaster. So I that's what I do. Okay. And so basically I on a whim decided to treat myself to a listening experience. I've never been into a music studio before in my life. I've never really listened to music at all outside of my headphones. And so basically I reached out to Q Division Studios and which is a studio nearby, and I offered them basically, can I bring my espresso machine to your studio so I can listen to music on your like on a proper sound system? And so we did that, and I, my life was I've never experienced music like that in my life, and so basically, right now I'm on a mission to kind of connect with people who do this who are involved in audio sound experience. And as a humble coffee roaster and home barista, maybe one day link up with folks and I can bring the coffee and the espresso machines and listen to some amazing music. So thanks for this. This is really cool. Anyway, I just want to introduce myself. Thanks.
Well, nice to meet you, Eric.
Yes, you've definitely come to the right place, Eric.
Thanks. Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's all I can say.
Eric, does your coffee enterprise include the instant coffee? Okay.
Uh, no, no Insta coffee
Uh,
here. Not my current blend includes Brazilian, Yemen, and El Salvadorian beans. But no instant coffee here. I hope to share it with you guys soon, maybe.
yeah. Okay, by my clock, it's 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So, Nick, you want to start it, or you want me to start it?
Go ahead. I'm finally unmuted.
Okay, we have with us today Tom Perazella, which many of you have seen at BAS, not only sites, but meetings. Anyway, he will talk about his, I'll say, custom design audio system from the ground up or from scratch up, whichever way you want to look at it. He did it the right way, which very few of us can do. But before we start the meeting, we always start with open forum, which is a feedback on what's happened in your audio life since a month ago. And Eric, you started out by telling us about what young people do with headphones.
You're on mute.
Oh,
There you go.
okay. Yeah. uh, yeah. This is amazing. I'm so looking forward to hearing about Daniel's building of this home sound system. And essentially, I've listened to music exclusively on, well, these headphones primarily, and headphones before. And yesterday, actually, yeah, I decided to see what a music studio sounds like for the first time in my life. And properly had my mind blown that these things are even possible for music to sound in an intimate setting that good was well, I'm here now, and I think it's probably because of that experience and a desire to want to explore this space. I'm very active in the home coffee, home barista world, and wow, my God, I would love to learn more about um, the home audio experience or music in general outside of headphones. Yeah, super excited. Thank you.
More open forum comments?
Yeah, this is Ken. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi there. Yeah, I wanted to report on a new component I purchased. It was pretty inexpensive. I think it was $299 from shipped from Hong Kong. This is the mini DSP preamp for phono input. And what they do is have of course, a low level input for both moving coil and moving magnet cartridges. And they do the equalization in the digital domain. So the signal is immediately converted into digital at a high resolution. And then they do the RIA equalization, but they have other equalizations in case you have obscure old albums that are recorded with those kinds of unusual parameters. But the the headamp is extremely low noise, very low distortion. It seems to do better than the the phono preamp inside my preamp, my analog preamp. So this means I can completely bypass the preamp, and I might be able to get rid of it. So if I can sell it for considerably more than that phono head stage cost, then I come out ahead. Always eager to see how I can simplify the system. And this is kind of the last piece in the puzzle to be able to get rid of all of that and just go entirely digital for all my analog inputs. So a recommended component, very inexpensive, and promptly shipped from Hong Kong by Mini DSP.
You have a picture of the DSP preamp? You can.
It's in a form factor that is half the size of a 19-inch rack mount. So it's about an inch tall and say 8 or 9 inches wide. So it's not like they're cigarette box size components. It's the middle size. It has a good interface. It's very easy to use. You can switch the load capacitance and load resistance to match different cartridges, which is nice. You can hear the difference right away. You don't have to open it up and change the components like my old preamp required. That was pretty much impossible to tune in. It just took too long to make changes to figure out what was going on.
Have you measured it?
I don't have, actually I do have an audio analyzer now that's adequate for measuring this thing, but I've not bothered. That's a good thing to do though. Be interesting to see how well it does. At least its specs are better than what is promised by the old analog preamp that I have, which is a well-regarded one, but this one was at least several times lower distortion. And you could hear that there was less noise. There's just background noises. It's reduced and it sounds nicer. Yeah, really impressive what can be done now with these new technologies. So, if you've been thinking about getting a phono preamp and put off by the thought of spending thousands of dollars for one of these fancy ones, I think this one does a really good job.
So I'm crashing your party today, and I thought maybe I should at least introduce myself. My name is Al Clark, and I think I first became acquainted with your group almost 50 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I think you're you're pretty old audio group as far as I remember. So I'm the founder of Danville Signal and part of the Tom's system, and I don't want to do any real shameless commerce today, but I am kind of here to answer any questions you might have. But Ken kind of brought up something that I did want to at least mention quickly, and that is the DSP Nexus does have a phono preamp. It's also digital. It's 47K input impedance differential balanced inputs. You can add capacitance if you want to. It matches the RIAA curve in at least math to 0.02 dB to 20 kilohertz, which is way better than you would do with an analog solution. I don't want to do any more sales pitch than that, but he did have to bring up phono preamps. And I actually have a history in phono preamps. I invented 3 topologies in my youth, including the split passive phono preamp. and probably the active passive one that many of you probably already have. I was 22 at the time. And like most of you today, I'm also one of those old white guys in audio. So I've got almost 50 years of professional experience. So I'll shut up now, but I'm really just here to answer any questions that may come up earlier, and I'm going to try to avoid hyperbole. Thank you.
Before you go, we were talking about you being a guest at some future BAS presentation. So,
Oh, I'd love to do that.
okay, next question. Analog RIA equalization has always talked about what happens above 20 kilohertz and below 20 hertz. And analog input for cartridges has typically varied at those two extremes. How does the digital RIAA curve work? Above
So
kilohertz and below 20 hertz.
it's somewhat arbitrary. So to be clear, it is impossible to absolutely match the RIAA curve as it's specified because it's specified in the S domain, meaning the analog domain. And you can't map a Z transform, a digital filter, precisely into analog. It's mathematically impossible. So you make fits, and so in our case, and I don't know about many DSPs case, we're sampling at 192 kilohertz, which means that those deviations we're talking about, and I haven't answered your question quite yet, but those deviations you're talking about become relatively small in the 20 to 20 kilohertz region. They'll become increasingly more significant as you get above 20 kilohertz. At low frequency, you can pretty much do anything you want as accurately as you want. So if you were concerned about subsonic filters or filters for, there used to be an implied equalization curve. It was an IAC one that was a high pass at low frequency. There's also what some people call the Neumann implied pole that's not really in the RIAA spec, but sometimes they talk about one at 50 kilohertz. So in principle, you can try to match any of those filters, and you can certainly match them probably reasonably well by either upsampling or sampling high in the first place. I think in the end, we probably obsess too much with how accurate it is to the RIAA curve. Since a speaker that's flat to a couple dB is pretty flat to an ear, but people do. So I'd say with a digital filter, you're capable of doing about anything you want within reason. The trick is doing the low frequency in your digital filter with enough precision that the 50 hertz corners don't actually have problems. And that's a precision problem, not the curve fit. That's why you can do 0 to 2 dB. And I didn't map that particular algorithm myself. That was done by a guy actually from your area, Scott Worser, did this in about 2015 or 16 in Linear Audio. He had an article. I wrote a procedure on how to do it that you can find in Do-It-Yourself Audio if you search my name at about maybe 2008, 7. So if you want to see a method for doing it, I actually wrote about it in Do-It-Yourself Audio.
So your filter cuts off above 20 kilohertz or 50 kilohertz?
Oh, it cuts off. Well, it starts cutting off at 2 kilohertz because that's the RIAA curve. Oops, sorry.
Button cut off.
I mean, it starts to roll off because there's a pole there.
Right.
At 21, 22. But fundamentally, it's good to, somewhere around 80 kilohertz. And that, I'm sorry, my trouble with this monitor is it's a 32-inch monitor, and we had an ice storm last night in Minnesota. I was going to do this at my office, but I'm not sure I can get up my hill. Welcome to winter, right? Never had that in the Boston area. So in principle, there's nothing it really keeps. I mean, to be clear, you're going to have unambiguous data at theoretically no higher than half the sample rate, which should be, in our case, is 192. I don't know in the mini DSP's case.
Yeah, I think for mini DSP it was half that, so.
It's more likely,
96,
yeah.
yeah, 9616 or 24.
Which means that theoretically, if they had did a good job of mapping somewhere, we'll call it 40 kilohertz. You don't ever really go half. You go something as you approach 48 in this case.
Anyway, it seems adequate for the signal that's being presented to it.
Yeah, I would
I
think,
the
I mean,
user, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I would agree with you in that sense. It's the reason you go at higher sample rates is you can map the curve more accurately.
I agree. That certainly seems high enough, but we did have, when surround sound was starting, LPs that put out a 50 kilohertz signal, if I'm correct.
There wouldn't have been very much output there.
Right, but it was supposed to give you more channels or something than stereo. In other words, 5 to 4 channel records or something. I'm a little vague on it, but there was something about that.
Yeah, JVC came up with a system that used, I think it was an FM carrier based around 50 kilohertz, but I'm not sure. It's been a long time.
That would have been really hard to do though on a turntable.
Yeah, they
I mean,
found that out. That's why the survived very long.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mechanical problem. It's not really the electronics in this case.
Thank you for that. The other item I want to mention, which some of you already know, is You Do It is definitely closed now.
Mm-hmm.
I received a notice that I think it was yesterday that they've had their final going out of business sale. Some of you remember, like I do, going out there in April when I thought it was their final going out of business sale. But they had another final going out of business sale, which ended yesterday. But more importantly, it's a closing down of a resource that the BAS has taken advantage of for years. It's gone. And too many of us are forced to rely on Amazon. And for those who can, Micro Center in Cambridge has been an unbelievably good resource. So,
Talking about, Alvin?
what's that?
What are you talking about?
You Do It Electronics.
They were a sales store for audio and video gear in Needham, as I recall,
Correct.
and commonly referred to as You Blew It Electronics. But yeah, they were a great resource for parts, electronic parts, small instrumentation, even video gear, some stereo gear, car stereos, etc. They were kind of a one-stop place for a wide variety of stuff.
They will be
Yeah, you
missed.
can buy solvents there, which I don't like to order, mail order. You know, all the stuff you want to spray, and also big things that are a pain to ship, like antennas
Yep.
and
Yeah,
everything.
they carried a lot of lighting equipment too for specialty lighting for weddings or dance parties or whatever.
Good books for browsing, ham radio books. It's good store.
Sound
They were a good resource for people who were just kind of getting involved in do-it-yourself projects in the electronics and audio and video areas.
And they had vacuum tubes too,
TV.
Yes.
right up to the end. Oh, I got something. Hi, Al and gang. Joel Goldberg. This is sort of a throwback, but I find that sometimes the only thing worth watching on TV is just out of interest, is something like what they call storage wars, where people bid on storage lockers that have been abandoned or up for sale. So there was one last week where somebody spotted what he thought was some 1970s stereo equipment and bid on had a feeling about it, bid on it, got it. When they went looking, what they found was a brand new inbox, never opened, never assembled Thorens turntable, which I think from the looks of it was later than the TD-124, which was the one I remember from way back. And also some Bozak speakers, talk about dinosaurs, but these were small, like a couple of bookshelf speakers and one maybe low frequency. And in any case, so they didn't know from that stuff, except in general, it looked like it might be worth something. So they took it over to an expert and they actually listened to something. I don't know the missing parts, I can't explain, but I didn't even see a receiver or an amplifier anywhere. But for at least for the Thorens turntable, and mind you, this guy assembled the Thorens turntable and they actually played an LP on it with those speakers. And then he offered them something like $1,800 for the package, which they accepted. So yeah, Thorens was, I mean, Thorens was sort of like the Rolls Royce where Garrard was the Chevy, I guess, back then. In any case, I think that was enjoyable to watch. You never know what you're going to see on those programs.
Now, Thorens is still, I believe, in business. I noticed a while back that if you have a 124, I think it was, there are some companies that can refurb them. And I saw one at one point on, I think it was eBay for close to $20,000.
Wow.
And I still have an old one. I haven't had it under wraps. I have a 224, which I used to refer to as the record flinger. It was an actual modification of the Thorens 124 into a record changer, which played one disc at a time on the table. It would literally lift the discs off and put new discs on and measure the size of the disc and drop the tone arm down on it. The new machines are essentially using the tone arm that was on that device. And of course, they went, as I recall, into a 125, which was a belt drive. Which is very different from what the 124 had. The 124 had a combination belt and rim drive. So there was a belt to a pulley that was stepped, and the stepped pulley was then engaged to the rim of the turntable platter through a rubber idler wheel. And it was kind of a complicated way to do it. And they also had a speed adjust, which basically was it was a magnetic system that they had a slide on the actual rim of the turntable, and it moved and created a drag on the actual turntable as you adjusted this mechanical lever across a plate system that evidently induced some kind of current in the aluminum table. Although it may not have been aluminum, it was pretty heavy now that I think of it. Maybe it was steel or iron or some kind of ferrous metal. And that actually was the speed control. Additionally, it had a strobe light built into the base because the table underneath had multiple strobe discs for the various speeds. The 124 could handle 78, 45, 33, and 16 2/3. So as I say, if you can find one these days, I don't know whether they're actually still manufacturing them, but if you find one, they're near and dear as far as price goes. They're still considered quite good.
Yeah, I have a dual 1219, which hasn't seen much use in a number of years, and I'm not sure if that's 3-speed or 4-speed or whether it's probably an idler wheel drive, not a belt drive, but I'm not sure. But I have to fire it up and see if that's doable. I had a Technics which I inherited and sold off in a fit of I don't know what. My main one is still a old, like maybe 30, 40-year-old Sony direct drive turntable, which is probably still an ideal system.
There is a Thorns 124 currently available, but it's looks like the old 124, but it's a direct drive. It's a brand new turntable.
Yeah, they've modified it to a direct drive now.
It's just looks the same. It's
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's direct drive. And I guess
125.
the biggest problem with the direct drives is getting over the cogging effect that they have from the drive. But
That's solved now.
that, yeah, I'm sure knowing Thorns, they probably solved it.
That's what heavy turntables are for.
Yes,
Yeah, I have
yes.
solved it.
Almost
momentum
probably the
keeps them
heavy
going.
turntable was aluminum, because there's nothing wrong with aluminum when it comes to things like magnetics.
Hmm.
By the way, there was a 125 and a 126. They were completely different from the 124 belt drive, and they had electronic speed control. I had a 125. It was built almost as well as the 124, which if anybody ever saw the inside of a 124 and
God,
dropped it on the floor was in danger.
yes. Yeah, the turntable, the actual frame of the turntable was steel or aluminum, but it was probably about a quarter of an inch thick,
And it
the
was a
whole
casting.
top platform.
It was a casting with ribbing and everything. It was absolutely gorgeous underneath.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was the proverbial brick you know what of turntables.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well. Hey, Ken, are you on an exercise bike? You're making me nauseous.
Sorry, I am. Try not to wobble too much. On the hard
Yeah.
hills, I have to do
Wow
that.
and flutter for you, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, you might want to cut me out, like low frequency noise.
You and Goldwater should team up.
No, he's on a treadmill. It's not bad with him.
We could raise them.
Yeah, have competitions.
Yeah. How many furlongs per fortnight?
Yeah, right. Right.
So if there's interest, we could do a presentation about this. If this isn't broadly known in the BAS community, these virtual exercise systems are just a blast. Quite amazing. Great, great technology. And there's audio in there a little bit.
Well, the best trick is to get a bicycle, rig it to a generator, and you can watch all the computer stuff you want as long as you keep pedaling.
And if you're really in good shape, you can power Class A amplifiers.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's for the Olympic fans.
If you've ever tried to power a generator to put out 1/4 horsepower, I did that one time at the Museum of Science in Chicago, and I am so happy that we have a power company here.
I just want to say this is incredible. I don't really understand much of the terminology you're using, but I'm just so excited to like learn more about this space, and I'm such a fan of the people here and your passion and understanding and history here. So yeah, super cool.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, there's a very good book, if you can still find it, called From Tinfoil to Stereo. And you're probably about where I was when I was, I don't even want to think about it now. I must have been about 12 or 13, maybe 14. But it goes through the whole history of the creation of the original tinfoil recording system that Edison developed right through the onset of stereo, and gets somewhat involved in all the details of where it went. But it ends with the black discs. And I think the original, they did talk a little bit about tape recorders, but that was about it. But it's a great introductory book on the history, and it's not exactly small. It's probably 200-300 pages, but it's an excellent book that gives you a nice insight into history. It kind of got me going in the field myself.
What was the name of it, Alan, again? Sorry.
From Tinfoil to Stereo.
Okay, thank you.
Check Amazon.
Yes.
Hey, Nick, you want to introduce our guest, or? Okay, and then I'll go ahead and introduce Tom Perazella. And I'll start off by saying our December meeting will be hosted by a longtime BAS member and audio writer, Tom Perazella. He used a privilege that few audiophiles have been able to implement. Years before he finished his new home, he designed a listening room, taking acoustics and speaker placement into account. Into that room, he positioned his custom-built egg speakers, which BAS members have some memory of. We had a presentation by one of the original producer, manufacturer, or inventor, maybe too strong a word, of egg speakers, and distributed subs. They were driven by 4 stereo amplifiers in Tom's home, digital DSP, used the new Danville DSP Nexus 2/8. And we, of course, have the designer of that on NQ. The information on the speakers, room acoustic treatments, and distributed subs have all been published in various issues of audiophile magazines. The primary music source for the in-house music files and streaming is Room Nucleus Plus. Tom will use a PowerPoint presentation to describe the philosophy that led him on this path. If desired, he can also go into some of the more difficult challenges of this approach, including having all the equipment except the speakers located on the equipment rack in the basement under the listening room. Okay, Tom? And I want to add to that, I had the privilege of listening to Tom's system, and it is fantastic. Or should I say to his room? It was fantastic. So I consider it probably one of the best point source loudspeakers I've ever heard, among the best, I should say. And Tom, it's all yours.
Well, thank you. Guys, I want to just start off by saying I've been in audio from the days when the dinosaurs were still roaming around. And along this path, I've taken many side treks, some of which were productive, and like everybody, a lot of them which were not productive. One of the things I'm going to do today is upfront tell you that some of the things I'm going to be talking about, I have a reasonable experience on. Others I do not, and that's why I'm glad to see both Al Clark and Rich Hollis here, because when it comes to digital audio, there's a lot that I don't know. I'm learning, but I have no desire to go into the depth that these two guys go into. That being said, the presentation today is going to focus on 3 areas: the speaker, the room, and the processing. All 3 of those I have found have been incredibly important in reaching what I call the sound that I want. And I think I could break it down into 2 different philosophies. One philosophy is the best you can do to get the sound so that you are in the sound space where it originally happened. The other is to get the sound done so well that it sounds like the performers are in your room. They may sound like they're the same, but they're really not. One of our members, Gary Eichmeyer, is on today, and he has done a lot of work with image model theory, and his theory and his system does an incredibly good job, from what I've heard from people that have heard it, I haven't, of producing a sense of space that you are in the original recording venue. And the method that I'm using here, it's more like I have brought the performers into my room. This is a method that I like because the speakers with the digital processing and the room treatments allow you to get into the very, very fine details of the music. And when you do that, I have coined a term, somebody may have used it already, but it is called texture. And what that means is if you have a group, let's say a choral group, or you have a brass choir, or you have other very complex music, the more that you can get into the details of that music, the more it sounds like the people are right here in the room. And I've had a number of people come in from different audio groups, and just lay people come in And one comment that I consistently hear from people when they listen to it is, my God, those people are right here in the room. That's the first thing they say. And the second thing they say is, I'm hearing things in the recorded sound that I have never heard before. So those two things, among all the various parameters of the music, dynamic range, flat frequency response, low distortion, etc., those two are very important to me to get a sense of the performers actually being here and the message that the performers are trying to convey by the way they play their instruments, by the way they work their voices in a chorus, and the ability to separate all the different performers. So one of the things I mentioned in one of the articles I did, which is the one on room treatments, and I'll touch on that later, is that a lot of people work in audio and they spend a lot of money and a lot of time on different equipment, constantly updating equipment, and they miss the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And in my article, I said in audio, the 800-pound gorilla is the room. If you look at the sound that you're getting in a normal size home listening room, this room is 16 by 20 feet with a 9-foot ceiling. And in a room like that, your sound is incredibly room dependent. And I'll go into some of the details of that later. So I'm going to concentrate on the speakers, the room, and very importantly, the processing of the sound. I will give you a little heads up. I'm not a fan of passive crossovers. I started with doing electronic crossovers when I had my Bozak symphonies way back, and I never went back to passive crossovers because of the control that you have with electronic crossovers and DSP nowadays, and the ability to get a performance level in terms of phase and timing that are just really difficult to do with passive crossovers. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start on a PowerPoint presentation that gives you some of my philosophy. I'm assuming I know how to share. Let me bring up a screen first. Let's see, where is it? Okay. I'm going to, in order to do this, I have to hit share, right? Somebody who knows Zoom? Share?
Yeah. Yeah.
Correct.
You hit share and then you select which, you can select the PowerPoint screen or the whole screen.
Okay, here we go. It is right here. Okay, can you guys see it? Okay. I call this unlocking music. Now remember, this is unlocking the music for me. I've heard a lot of different systems that are very good and they meet the
We're
requirements.
actually not seeing the presentation. I think you're still sharing your Fletcher window.
Your file
yeah.
manager is showing it.
Start slideshow is the key to this whole operation.
Okay, I thought I had done that. Hold on one second, please.
Sure.
All right, now you can see my screen where it says it's.
Yeah, we can see the finder.
You can see your file manager.
Right, okay, so now I'm going to click on this and it does come up on my screen and it says you are screen sharing.
Not that screen.
Yeah.
We're looking at your file manager still.
So when you share your screen, you can share the entire monitor or you can share a particular window. And it looks like you shared a window. So you might want to unshare and then share the whole monitor. That'll get
Okay,
really wild.
can you see it now?
Yes, there's an
Yeah.
unlock of music.
Yeah, we can see
Yes,
it.
it's there.
Okay, thank you. I've never done this before, so bear with me.
Ta-da!
Okay, so as I was saying, this to me is unlocking the music for me. Lots of different systems I heard that were very, very good, very different, and they met the requirements of the people that had those systems. And my philosophy is, if somebody tells you that you have a system that you like very much, and they think it's lousy, you should change it, don't tell them not to let the door hit them on the way out. It's all about you and what you want. And what I said, I'm looking for this detail and this texture in the music. And here is, let's see. So first thing I'm going to talk about is the speakers. And I'm going to talk about speaker diffraction. And I found out about this the hard way with some speakers that I had that had a lot of diffraction, and it really interfered with the detail in the sound. Then we'll talk about room acoustics, and I consider those two really keys to outstanding sound. I know a lot of you may know about speaker diffraction, but just in case, I'm going to go through it. Essentially, diffraction is creation of frequency anomalies as the sound moves across the baffle of the speaker. And when it does that, it has a certain impedance against the baffle. When it gets to the edges, that impedance changes. And there was a lot of work done on this by Harry Olson, and he did a paper back in 1950, Audio Engineering Society, and he investigated a whole bunch of different shapes and how they affected it. So these are some of the shapes. I just picked a few of them, and you can see what happens to the frequency response. The first one on the left is a square box with the driver right in the center. The next one to the right is rectangular, and because there are different distances, you don't get a buildup of the anomalies quite as bad. The next one is sort of a trapezoidal shaped front, which seems to be very smooth. And then there's that's hard to see. That's not a flat surface. It's actually a sphere. I don't know if any of you have seen the Gallo speakers where they've got these little spheres, and that gives you a fairly smooth response. So what you want to do is you don't want to be adding a lot of anomalies to the reproduced sound by having these edge diffractions. And this was my inspiration. This guy, John Odovos, up in Canada, built a speaker called the Mach 17, and it got really rave reviews by the people that heard it. And I looked at it, it looked kind of clunky, and I said, well, maybe I can take that philosophy and do something better. So, by the way, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, I have some references in the share on the screen. So if you want to look at any of those, they will be there. So I decided to get some drivers from SB Acoustics. They had just come out with them, and I read about this in Audio Express. I contacted them. I said, I'd really like to build an egg speaker using these drivers. I can tell you this Satori Beryllium tweeter that I'm using is one of the best tweeters I've ever had. And I've had all kinds of tweeters. I've had Sequera T1 ribbons. I've had AMTs. I have Janssen Electrostats. I've had planers from VG. Without a doubt, the only tweeter I ever heard that was better than this was, I don't know if you ever heard of it, but what was it? Oh my God, it's terrible to get old. The Heil, not the Heil, the Hill Plasmatronic. It was a tweeter that had 5 chambers, was fed by a big tank of helium, and had 5 high voltage vacuum tube modulators that modulated the plasma. I heard that one time, and the high frequencies were just amazingly good. And the rest of the speaker was so-so. And it was amazing the one day a month that it worked, because these high voltage plasma boards were always breaking down and everything. But this Satori tweeter is the closest thing I've ever heard to that Hill Plasmatronic, and it works. There are other berylliums out there right now. If you are interested in the technical details of beryllium and why it makes a good driver, there are a number of places out there that will tell you all the things like Young's modulus and all the other parameters of material that make beryllium a really good material. The mid-range is a paper driver, and I think paper gets a bad rap, and paper does a lot of good things. It doesn't have a lot of resonances. It is not especially good for a subwoofer where you've got high pressures. They tend to break up. For mid-range, they work very well. And then I used these Dayton audio woofers. I've used Dayton woofers for years now, and they give me a huge bang for the buck. One of the things I will measure is that I will mention is I have done an awful lot of double-blind testing. In fact, I have a QSC AVX box. I've been a firm believer in double-blind testing, but when we get further on into this, when you start talking about DSP processing and trying to do double-blind on that, it's out of my range. So a lot of the things that I'm going to say today are not fact that's been proven with double-blind testing. They're not even theories. They're more my opinions based on lots and lots of listening to music that I'm very familiar with. So this is what I decided to do. Instead of having that squat bass cabinet with that rubber place where you stuck the egg in, I decided to make this with a truncated pyramid on the base, but I didn't want to have this big wide front plate. So I made it narrow, but in order to get the volume I needed to make it deep. Well, it started off as a rectangle on the bottom, and on the top, it was a square that I rounded off the edges to meet the egg. Easy, right? Not. That was one of the most difficult boxes I ever made, because going from a rectangle to a square like that, there is not a 90-degree cut in the wood in that cabinet. I actually had to go out and buy a digital protractor to set the saw angles. That was a real challenge. Okay, now we get on to the biggest problem, and that is the room. Early reflections really, in my mind, are a real problem because your brain can't separate them out, and it steps on the detail. For example, if you have a sound and it goes out of the speakers, and that sound may have some of the room, the room reflections in that sound, but then along comes another note, and that note may be higher in amplitude, and it steps on those earlier lower frequency sounds. Your mind can't separate that out. So the room is a real problem in terms of early reflections. Now, I'm talking about a regular room. If you've got a big auditorium, what you're hearing coming back from the room is more ambiance than things that muck up the sound. But in a typical room, early reflections are a problem. So a lot of people have decided, okay, let me just kill all those room reflections. And they put tons of absorption in there. And that's like almost listening in an anechoic chamber. I don't know if you've ever been in an anechoic chamber, but it is really freaky. I've been in anechoic chambers and I've been in totally reflective chambers. And neither one of those you want to be in if you're listening to music. So if you have too much absorption, it becomes very dead. So what you need to do is you need to make a balance. Okay, you can't totally eliminate all your early reflections, but you want to minimize the ones that are going to cause you the most amount of damage. And you need a mix of absorbers and diffusers. And they have to be in the right locations. I will tell you up front, I'm not an acoustician. So what did I do? I went out to a good acoustician. I went out to Sonatus USA, and there's a guy named Anthony Gramani. You may have seen him on some of the blogs that are out there. He's treated about 1,500 different rooms. And what I did is I sent him the drawings, the architectural drawings of the room that I had from when we built the room. And on those drawings, I marked in the location of the speakers and the furniture in the room. And he came back and said, okay, you need this, and this, all these different diffusers, absorbers, and so on. And this is where you need to put them. So that's what I did. Now, what I'll do is after I get through with this presentation, I'll take my camera and I will move it around the room, and I'll show you how the room looks like and how they're laid out and what some of them do. But there is a link to Sonatus USA out there and the share area. And if you go out and look, they'll tell you about all the details of all the different absorbers and diffusers and so forth that I'm not going to go into detail on. I do have some pure absorbers. There are some places you need them, especially on the ceiling and the path between the speakers and you. Those ceiling reflections are a real problem. You don't have to worry about it so much in the floor if you've got carpeting or something like that, but the ceilings are difficult. I have lots of diffusers in here that you'll see. And by the way, this whole thing is in one of the articles that I did, and that's in the references also. But diffusers randomize the modes, and they don't overdamp. So what happens is the things that might be a particularly difficult single mode get spread out, and they get less obtrusive that way. Then there are combination absorbers and strip reflectors, and I'll show you those later. But what they do is they convert the sound into a two-dimensional plane to give you a little sense of envelopment.
Tom, if
Again,
I can interrupt, what's a mode?
a room mode. If you look at a room, and you should go out there and Google this because it's very important. In a room, depending on the frequency and the size of the room, you will find you'll get areas in the room where there are great attenuation of the sound and also great reinforcement of the sound. In other words, you get unevenness in the sound pressure as you go to different points in the room. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later with Schroeder frequencies and in relationship to different frequencies. But the room will produce these uneven and evil differences in pressure that really affect the sound. So what you want to do is you want to try to, at least in the higher frequencies above the Schroeder frequencies in a room, you want to try to make those as distributed as possible so they don't all gang up on you. Once you get, and I'll explain the Schroeder frequency in a bit, once you get below that, room treatments are really not very effective because the wavelengths are too long. Okay, so absorbers / reflectors, which I have in the front wall, absorb the middle frequency so that your voices and your fundamentals on instruments are not mucked up. But it does reflect the higher frequencies, which gives you a little more sense of space. Corner bass traps help, but everybody thinks corner bass trap is going to help you down to 20 hertz or 15 hertz. Not. Even 60 hertz is kind of pushing it. Usually about 100 to about 300 hertz is where the corner bass traps are effective.
Is that a mechanical device?
No, these are passive. They're wedge-shaped pieces of foam. There are active devices that can go to very low frequencies. Also, there's some passive devices like Helmholtz resonators that can be used at very low frequencies. But most of what people consider as bass traps are very small pieces of foam. They're better for, like say 100 to 300 hertz, but they're not going to do any good down at 20 hertz. Schroeder frequency, and this has nothing to do with peanuts. Schroeder frequency is defined as the point usually between 100 and 200 hertz in a room where you have the room nodes decrease in number and distribution. And above the Schroeder frequency, because of the wavelengths involved, you get more of the modes, and they tend to average out. So once you get below about 100 to 200 hertz, you really have problems with trying to deal with bass modes. Then you also have something else called speaker boundary interface. If you take your speaker and put it next to any boundary, I mean, Roy Ellison with his floor bounce, walls, ceilings, you will get attenuation and you will get boosts. And that winds up producing these problems in the frequency response at your listening position. And that speaker boundary interface, believe me, cannot be fixed by EQ. It's a fool's errand, because if you put more energy into a speaker where there is a cancellation, let's say, and you think it's going to give you a better response at your listening position, well, that same energy that's causing the cancellation hits the other wall and it takes it out. Now, I've had it in this room. I have a dip on one side at around 40 hertz, and it's down about 30 dB. Now you can pump. I've got 1200 watt per channel amplifiers driving the subs and the bass, and you can run them until there's flames coming out of the speaker. It doesn't matter. You won't get rid of those dips, because the more sound comes out of the driver, the more sound gets reflected off the interfering surface. And unless you have a very, very low Q, suck out, which you can ameliorate to some degree with EQ, it's not going to work. So what do? You need distributed subwoofers. And by the way, when I'm talking about distributed subs in this discussion, these distributed subs that I have are really not subwoofers. They're designed to take out these problems that are around 40 hertz. I've got
So the adage that low frequencies aren't directional and you can put the subwoofer anywhere is not accurate.
it's half accurate. The low frequencies are not directional, but once you interface with the room boundaries, you get modes that are different in different positions. So the generation of the sound is not directional, but the interface with the room produces modes. And if you go out online, there are a number of places that show you, you can actually put in the size of your room, and you can put the speakers in different positions, and it will show you the different modes and where the pressure wave will be high and where it'll be low. So it's partly correct. If you look at it just by itself, the low frequencies are non-directional, in a regular room, but the room modes can kill you.
And just as an aside, Room EQ Wizard is one of those tools that you can put your room dimensions in and look at what the modal response looks like, so you can get an idea of what you actually have.
Right. There's a lot of tools out there that will do that, and they will show you what will happen. If you put in multiple drivers, I'll just say drivers instead of subwoofers, at different points in the room, what you're doing essentially is you are increasing the number of modes as you would get if you were above the Schroeder frequency, but you're below it. So now you need to have multiple sources to fill in. And there's some papers that are referenced in the references that I have out there. And this is entirely up to the room and the speaker placements. There is no one firm thing. You can't say, I'm just going to always put the speakers at this point in the room and it's going to work. You actually have to look at your room and decide where you're going to put the drivers and take measurements. I took the easy way out. This room is strictly an audio room. It is not a home theater. I can sit in one spot. I don't care if anybody else is in here or not. I'm going to optimize the room for my spot. So that's what I did. You can get a better, more even bass response in rooms with multiple woofers, but it is more difficult than just doing it for one position. By the way, the research that's been done has found that probably from a reasonable standpoint, the optimum number of distributed woofers or subwoofers in a room, in most rooms, is 4. If you go below that, you will get some advantage. And if you go above that, the advantage becomes very small compared to the cost to do it. Now, the first thing you have to do if you're going to try to get rid of these problems, these speaker boundary interface and room problems, is you got to figure out where is the frequency that's causing a problem. So you've got to do measurements and do the left and right side individually, because in this room, I've got like about a 30 dB suck out on the left side if I just put the left speakers on, and I had about an 8 dB on the right side. So you really needed to measure them individually. Your room you think is symmetrical. For some reason, it's not. What I also did is I set these distributed subs with a crossover point just above the dip, because I didn't want it to interfere with any of the higher bass, lower mid-range that I'm getting out of my main. I did all this work to get the main speakers very good, and I didn't want them to interfere. So there's no reason to go up above the frequency that you're trying to work with. Obviously, if you're moving drivers around the room, you've got to allow for time differences. So you need to measure the time arrival from all of the drivers and get them, again, time aligned. By the way, the way I do the time alignment of all the drivers, not only the distributed subs, is I built a little 555 pulse generator, and the pulse width is 100 milliseconds. So that effectively gives me all the frequencies down to about 10 hertz. And what I do is I have a dual channel scope. I send a pulse out into one single driver, let's say a tweeter, and I'm look at the time that the pulse goes out, and I look at the time that the pulse arrives, the sound pulse arrives at the mic. And I do that for all the other drivers. And then that difference between when the pulse happens and when it arrives at the mic, that difference is the adjustment you have to do in the drivers to get them to align on a time basis.
So you have time delay capability in the drivers?
I have time delay capability in the DSP Nexus. In other words, that digital processor is doing that. And you can actually go in there, look at the time offset. You can set it into the DSP processor, remeasure it, and you can see how these things come into alignment. And that's especially important when you've got drivers around the room. You know, some drivers are like 12 inches from me, and the others are like 8 feet from me.
Are time delays used in large auditoria?
I'm not an acoustician, but I have read that they have been used. And the advantage of that is that as you move back in the auditorium, you are getting a sense of the same sound. It's not, you're not getting these time delayed echoes. Again, I'm the wrong guy to ask, but I've read that they nowadays what is very popular is using line arrays and then using digital time alignment between the different arrays to make sure the sound gets there at the proper time. So, I mean, there's a lot of work that's been done on that. I have done none of that, so I'm not the right guy to ask on that. And then once you get everything done, you set the gain of the sub amps. And in my case, I have a couple of amps that have analog adjustments for gain, others don't. Doesn't matter, because with the Nexus, I can go in there and set the gains and get them all to match. This is the most important thing, time and time again. Measure it and then listen again. I can tell you that a lot of speakers that I've designed that measured perfectly flat, I didn't like the way they sounded. My brain and my ears do not work like my microphone and my computer. So you have to start with measurements, because if you don't, you get into what I call wandering in the desert. Your brain, if you make an adjustment of one part of the frequency response, you hear that, but it also sounds to your brain like you made an adjustment somewhere else. And pretty soon you wind up chasing your tail. So start with the measurements and then make final adjustments. They should not be gross. You should not need gross adjustments if you started with good measurements in the first place. This is very important. When you're auditioning, pick the right kind of music for auditioning. It's got to have a lot of different combinations of transient response, dynamics, instruments, vocals, and everything, because you need to really stress the system. And this is very important also. I've done this before. If I really like a piece of music, I use it for tests. It's terrible, because I get so wrapped up in the music, I don't listen to what I'm testing for. So you want to pick some good music, but you also want to pick some crummy music, and you want to pick music that's going to test it. I've got some, old rock test pieces that I used. I've got some very modern classical pieces. But if you can get a good sound out of a lot of different types of music, then that's what you're looking for. At least that's what I'm looking for. Here again, don't forget the equal loudness curves, the old Fletcher-Munson curves. It's going to sound different as you change the level. So listen to it at high levels, low levels. Try to get to the levels you normally listen to, but then again, it depends on, for me, it depends on my mood. Some days I'm listening at 80 to 90 dB. Some days the peaks I'm listening to are almost 110 dB. So, caveat emptor.
Tom,
So-
do you ever use pink noise or white noise at all?
I have found that I don't like that. I use before I was using Liberty Audio Suite. I'm going to stop the sharing now. Oh, wait, before I stop the sharing, I want to show you one more thing you might find.
Have you considered using the BAS test disk?
Yeah, I have. What I do is I use the signals, the MLS signals that are available. I used to use Liberty Audio Suite, and now I'm using RumiQ Wizard, and their test signals are very effective. And I find that more effective than using pink noise, white noise, or any of the other things. I just want to show you one thing here. To give you an idea, I'm going to share. That's my audio rack in the basement. So the only thing that is in the upstairs that you will see are the speakers and my turntable, which I almost never use, and my analog preamp. But if you look at this, on the bottom is a Crown Studio reference, 1200 watts per channel, a Crown macro reference. That's for the distributed subs and the main woofers. Underneath here are two of the from VTV amplifiers made based on the Purify Eigentach, 400 watts per channel. Very, very high quality digital amps. You can barely see it here. That is the heart of everything. That is the Danville Nexus. And above that is the Rune. To the left here is a desktop that's configured for Rune Bridge. Yeah, Rich is holding up the Nexus right now. The Rune Bridge goes between the Rune nucleus and the DSP. Rune said that even though they have a USB output, it works better through a bridge, and I don't know why, but believe me, I did it, and it works better through the bridge. So I run from the Rune over to the Rune Bridge, over to the Nexus, and then it goes out to all these amplifiers and then to the speakers. Now, this little gadget, by the way, is, I tested this for the magazine one time. This is a little DAX 88 from Parts Express. It's my whole house system, and it's got 8 channels of, it's got 6 channels of Class D amps, 6 stereo channels, and I've got 6 rooms in the house that have music. This is the first piece of audio equipment I have ever gotten and brought into the house where my wife didn't want to kill me. She loves this thing. She goes there with her iPhone and picks a room and listens to music. It is a earth-shaking advance, not from supposed quality of sound, but for quality of life with my wife. So, and over here on the left is all my data. I've got my incoming internet connection is fiber optics from Verizon. So all the data equipment's here, and then all the audio equipment's here. This little thing is a soft start circuit, so I don't pull the breakers off the wall when I turn everything on. It also looks at the line voltage, and if the voltage goes too low or you get a glitch, it just turns everything off. And down here is my speaker protection circuit. If you are working with over 6 kilowatts, you need to do something to protect your speakers. And that will be out, I think, in the February issue of Audio Express. The article will be out on that. That, by the way, is interesting if any of you are technoid people. My earlier one, which is over here, used relays. This one uses back-to-back N-channel enhancement MOSFETs because the channels are purely resistive and the impedance is about 14 milliohms. So no relay contacts to get dirty or cause noise, or no relay bounce. So anyway, enough of that.
Tom,
Okay. Any questions so far?
I throw in a
can you hear
comment?
me?
Pardon?
Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, Gary.
Okay, what is the interface that you're using to communicate with your equipment in the basement? The Rune?
The only thing that I interface with from upstairs to the basement is an infrared link that picks the remote control of the Nexus up in my room and feeds it down below. Because all of my volume control is through the Nexus. My source control is through the Nexus. That on a regular basis is the only thing that I need to do to, by the way, Rune is on the network. The Rune machine is on the network. So I can go to my phone, I can go to my tablet, I can go to my laptop, I can pick up Rune and play the music. But as far as the volume control or the source control, that's done through the Nexus with a little infrared link that goes from upstairs to downstairs. You can see these all over. It's a little infrared receiver, and it feeds a transmitter downstairs to go to all your equipment.
I use infrared to communicate with all my stuff, but I have to have my TV monitor on. You don't have a TV monitor in your sound room,
No,
do you?
because all the stuff that has to deal with the music I see on the Rune app. The Rune app, I have a little tablet. It's a little 10-inch tablet. Rune is running on that. I can go out and pick any of my music, or I can go out to Qobuz and pick any music there. I can pick the tracks. I can play them in any order I want. I create playlists. The only thing I don't want to do with Rune is control the volume. The control of the volume through the Nexus is a much better way to do it. So I use the Nexus for source selection and volume control. Now that's assuming I've done all of my modifications and timing and everything else, and now I'm just playing the music.
Can you tell us about the difference between controlling the volume with Groove and with Nexus? What your ears tell you versus what design says?
I think, Al could probably talk more about that, but you've got, well, you can talk about Al, 32-bit, you got a lot of headroom, very low noise and a lot of headroom with the Nexus. So Al, you want to address that?
Well, the gain is really just done. Well, first of all, you adjust the amplifier. There are programmable analog attenuators in the Nexus that are used to right size to the amplifiers, so that full scale of your DAC should represent the loudest you want that amplifier to go. If you've done that, you maximize signal to noise and dynamic range within that chain. And then the actual gain itself is actually done in the DACs itself from there. So you're right sizing the DAC to the amplifier chain, because that's going to be a function of the sensitivity of the drivers and the sensitivity of the power amps. And in general, they're different. I mean, in any system. So you optimize that first, and then these DACs, are basically signal to noises that are in the, mid 120s and higher, depending on which DACs are being used in the system. And we're just using the internal DAC controls at that point.
Because I'm familiar
ahead.
with the volume control, but also all the equalization possibilities inside Groove that it supports. And I suppose you could do this processing in one place or another. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the trade-offs.
Well, in principle, you can. Are you talking about? I'm a little confused what the question is. So let's reframe it,
Yeah.
please.
So the Rune player has its own equalization capabilities and also volume, and this is all done in the digital domain. And then that's passed on to your processor. So my question for you is, are there trade-offs in doing this processing in one place or the other, or it's more dependent on the manner in which it's done within those components? And it's hard to say without knowing the context.
Yeah. Okay. So there are some things that matter. So if you're talking about the crossover design itself, that matters quite a bit. Fundamentally, you're equalizing, the system frequency response Above Schroeder, that's going to be largely room independent. And below Schroeder, it's room dependent. So the choice of filters and how you implement filters, let's say that we've agreed on what the correction should be, whatever that means, which would be far more sophisticated probably in the Nexus than it would be in Rune. But it can be in general is probably capable of being far more complex than you probably should do it, because there's enough MIPS to not limit you on what you can do. But just because you have the numbers also isn't completely sufficient by itself, because the implementation of those digital filters also matters. There are different structures that one can use, and the textbook method for doing it, which is typically called a direct form 1 biquad, or not a direct form 1, but a direct form type biquad, is actually not particularly good at low frequencies. So there are different structures involved with that. So in some ways you'd say, well, math is math and it shouldn't make any difference. It's just that math implementation isn't quite the same from one processor to another choices. Nexus was designed to have a lot of MIPS. And
Well, so if you were to give advice to people on what sort of digital signal would be best to feed to your processor, how would you advise them to set that up? To a 0 dB level, a little bit below to prevent clipping? What sorts of guidance do you give?
the digital signal, first of all, and anytime you're clipping, it's bad no matter what you're using. So clipping is not good, but you, in principle, you'd like to operate close to clipping, or more correctly, you'd like to operate so that your DACs are operating close to clipping, because that's going to maximize the dynamic range of your signal chain. That's assuming that the linear part of your anti-imaging filters are fine. In other words, that you don't have some reason as you get close to clipping that the linear portion of your system isn't performing well. So if you're looking just at one piece, just the DAC, for instance, the DAC, you start with a good converter from AKM or from somebody else. In my view, AKM makes the best, but that's an opinion. But you're going to start with some kind of good part. And then the job as a designer is to not screw that up, and you still have other pieces to do. You've got anti-imaging filters, you've got layout, you've got all sorts of things that you can certainly still screw up or not maximize the opportunities you have. But if the DAC isn't good, nothing I do matters either. And if you've done all those things right, then you want your DACs to operate so that its full scale is close to the lot of signal you care about. And then you've right-sized your amplifiers and the rest with the rest sensitivities. And that'll maximize the signal to noise in your system.
All right, makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Ken, if I could just add something, working with the Nexus, I have always taken the output from Rune and run it at 0 dB, and I've done all the adjustments. And if Rune is going to pass a digital signal where the digital signal in the recording was clipped, well, you're screwed. So I've always run it with 0 dB and done all the volume adjustment with the Nexus, and it's been fine. I will say one thing here again. I will give an opinion. This is my opinion, because my work with electronic crossovers and DSP goes all the way back to the Bozak original electronic crossover when I had my Bozak symphonies. And I've gone through Behringer, I've gone through Mini DSP, I've gone through DEQX, and now I'm on the Nexus. And I can tell you I can't do the measurements. I don't have the capability of doing measurements at that level. But I can tell you what I'm hearing coming out of that Nexus 2/8 is just absolutely phenomenal, better than any of the other DSP or electronic crossovers I've had over a period of a lot of years with a lot of music and a lot of different speakers.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, of course, Room gives you many controls you can fiddle with. And I tried that. And I find myself getting very confused. I've never been happy with anything in the end. I just turn it off. I was wondering if that was your experience as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, my experience has been get in touch with Rich Hollis. If you're because when I started off and I was working with the original crossover, the very simple crossover from Bozak, it was pretty straightforward. It was a 6 dB per octave. You just pick the slope and you're off to the races. Had no other controls. Then I got into the Behringer equipment, and I did some things that I had never been able to do before, like dynamic EQ, where you could have a bass boost at low levels, and as you go up in levels, it would back that off so you don't overload the drivers, and then you could actually match your Fletcher-Munson curve. But once I got to that point, and I got into that and the mini DSP, I said, I'm getting kind of confused here. I'm not a digital guy. And so when I got the DEQX, I got smart and I got a hold of Larry Owens, who is their rep that does the setup, and he set up the unit for me. Now, I went in and did minor, controls for like some parametric EQ or something, but he did all the major work. When I got the Nexus, I went to Rich and says, Rich, help. And Rich took what I had in the DEQX and he ported it over to the Nexus. And along the way, we've made some other changes. But all I've got to say is if you're getting into the kind of performance that you can get out of modern DSP and what it can do to your system is just staggeringly good. Deal with somebody who knows about it. To give you an idea, when I got the DEQX, the instruction manual was 123 pages. Even if I was crazy enough to go through the 123 pages and learn everything it could do, I still didn't have the practical experience of these people that do it day in and day out. So I have gone out to other people that know how to do it. And to give you an idea, with the DEQX at one point, Larry said, okay, well, DEQX is saying I should do this. He says, I'm not going to do it. He said, I've done that. I know it doesn't sound right. So work with people like Rich that have been doing this. I mean, Rich has been working with Audio Weaver for what, about 10 years, Rich? And so, why would I go there? I don't have the smarts and I don't have the time to learn it. And there are people out there that can do it. But once you do find the people that know how to do it, the results are staggering. And I will give you an example. Now, I've had discussions with Al, and believe me, I trust him. He knows more about digital than I do. But the latest implementation of the Nexus, where I got a more powerful processor, to me, and this is an opinion, and I will only say it's an opinion because I can't do double line testing with it. But the sense of detail and lower distortion sounds better with the faster processor. I'll give you an example. I heard a live performance of the Chicago Brass Quintet. You might go out and check them out. They have some nice music. And I had a live performance. I listened to it. I bought their CD. I came home and I listened to it, and it didn't sound quite so good. Sounded a little bit bright, and the texture of the brass was not quite so good. Well, I put that same digital file on once I got the new processor in the Nexus, and every single note was separate. The harshness that you get sometimes with brass was gone. Not saying that it wasn't there, the transients were there, but the harshness was gone. I recently took Christmas with the Rat Pack, real high quality recording. Well, you listen to that and you listen to the band, and the same thing was true. You could hear every note in the band. And every voice was clear. Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr. You could hear their vocal cords moving. And I had somebody come over recently and listen. I said, listen to that voice. You can hear them modulate their vocal cords. So that's the kind of thing that you can get if the processing is set up properly. I can't do it. Rich can do it. other people who are familiar with it can do it. So if you're going to go that route, if you really want to get the maximum out of it, work with people that know what they're doing. What I'd like to do right now is just give you a quick run around in the room. I'm going to take my camera and I'm going to show you the different treatments and give you an idea. And then we can get some more questions if you'd like. But I'm going to start and show you, this is the door that leads into the room. Okay. Now from there, I'm going to show you the left wall. And if you look at the left wall, the first thing you see are these cream colored diffusers. Now those diffusers are right in line with the listening couch. Over there are two black things which are absorbers to get some of the side reflections off of the speakers. Further down are what I call these panels. Well, let me walk over there. You can probably see them a little better. Bear with me. Those panels that are the wood colored panels are the ones that take the sound. They have different angled wooden pieces that spread the sound around. Behind them are absorbers. In the corner is that bass trap I was talking about. Now, right behind, well, a little to the left and right of the speakers are some more absorbers. And then these walnut panels, those are covering some absorbers. But the holes in the walnut panels let the range of fundamentals on the instruments and voices pass through there and get absorbed, but they reflect the higher frequencies that give you, again, a sense of space. It's a compromise. Over there is the other wall, and this is the right wall. Here again is my listening position. And there's a right wall that has some absorbers, some of those reflective panels, some more absorbers and diffusers. And what you want to see here is the diffusion right next to my listening position. I'm going to go up to the ceiling. There's more diffusion. And then I come down to more diffusion. So all around listening position is diffusion. And then the back wall has diffusers, but right behind my listening position are absorbers and then more diffusers. I don't know exactly why they're all positioned there. That was done by Anthony Grimani, but I can tell you that it works.
Was this a result of measurements or empirical analysis, trial and error?
Yes and no. I'm sorry to always give you yes and no answers. Let me put this camera down so nobody gets sick from the movement. Originally, I just took what Anthony Grimani said and I put it in there. Then if you read my article, you will see where I did some measurements at various stages as I put in absorbers and diffusers, and you can actually see the measurements. One of the things that you will notice, oh, by the way, this is pretty important too. This is one of the windows. If you look at that material, it is sort of like a reedy material. And behind this reedy material, which gives you some diffusion, is a white absorbing cloth. So it has both diffusion and absorption over the windows, because obviously windows are killers.
Did you have those custom made?
Yes, they were custom made. They were, when we had the house built, we had all the window treatments done custom made. I found this treatment and I didn't know how it was going to work, and it turned out really well with that sort of textured material and the absorption behind it. It does make a huge difference when you put those up. You get a lot of reflections off the glass, as you would expect.
One other query, Tom, is the door behind you a solid core door, or is it just a frame door, or what?
It's a heavy frame door, but it's not solid core. I can tell you that right now you might hear a little bit. I've got two heat pumps outside the room, so I get a little bit of noise of the heat pumps when they're on. if I'm doing some serious listening, I can turn them off. If the heat pumps are not running, now I am at the limits of measurements of my microphone. I have an ACO Pacific 7012 capsule, really high quality capsule. But I'm measuring around somewhere around 25 to 26 dB background noise in the room. I can't say that's really accurate because again, I'm right at the limit of the mic, but everybody who comes in, I close the door and they go, oh my God, it's quiet in here. And that helps you because, you know, you talk about, yeah, 24 dB dynamic range, good luck. You know, if your background noise in a room is 40 dB and you're going to go up, you know, into the realm of a jet engine in your room. So most people cannot get the full dynamic range of even the recordings that are out there because they've got a lot of background noise. There is, by the way, to eliminate sound coming out of this room, on the walls that are to adjacent rooms, underneath the drywall is a layer of homosote. I don't know if you've ever worked with homosote material, but a 5/8 inch thickness homosote gives you the equivalent sound absorbing or restriction to sound passing through as a staggered wall, staggered stud, regular drywall with insulation in it. So I don't need the staggered studs. I have the homosote, and I also do have the insulation behind it. So the homosote is on every wall that joins another room. The other thing that helped, I was fortunate that I have the 2 heat pumps because the house is so big, but the one section of the heat pump that the sound room is in only feeds the guest bedrooms upstairs, which are normally empty. And the rest of the house is on a different heat pump with different ducts so that I don't get sound through the ducts. By the way, if you ever want to see somebody who did a really good job of soundproofing, I was at Earl Getty's house. I don't know if you've ever heard of Earl Getty's, but he has a home theater room in his basement, and he has mufflers that he built in the ducts that feed that room. And you can be the next room over, you can't hear anything. I didn't have to do that because I have 2 systems. And so that eliminates the sound coming through the HVAC ducts into the other rooms and vice versa.
What did you do for ceiling material?
The ceiling material are these absorbers, again, from Sonatus. They're, let me see if I can get this. Those are 2x4 panels that are 2 inches thick, and you'll notice, I don't know if you can notice, but they are suspended from the ceiling. And it's very important if you're going to have absorbers like that, that you leave an airspace behind them. The efficacy of that type of absorber is greatly compromised if you put them flat against the wall. I don't know the reason why. I've just seen the measurements.
And the
you said
ceiling itself, the ceiling itself, Tom, sorry, I didn't mean to step on somebody else.
Okay. The ceiling is the drywall with the homosote in there and insulation because the bedrooms are upstairs. Okay, there's another question.
Oh, I thought, did you mention you wrote an article about this room, Tom?
Yeah, in other words, if you go
Could you link it?
if you go into the chat room, you can see I've got some references there, and it lists a whole
Oh, I
bunch.
missed that. I
Yeah.
can't see it because I joined late, I think, after you sent that.
Yeah, so if you look there, you'll see the articles that I've written, plus some by Earl Getty's, the Sonatus USA site. Harmon, that document is very good about distributed subs.
The chat does not disappear, it's there.
Yeah, it's still there. If you click on chat, you'll see it.
I only see one thing. I don't see it. Yeah.
It's the second one down. It says the first thing you see is some links to different things. So they're all there.
Okay.
What I'm seeing is just a list of participants.
A list of
Yeah, in the chat, I don't see it. I think it's because I joined late that I didn't get
No,
that
that-
information.
Could anybody else see that? Those references I have?
No, I don't see them, Tom. I don't see your references in the chat room.
It's to everyone.
I see something that talks about Facebook.
Oh, that was me. Sorry.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me see if I can.
Oh, yeah, because all I see here, Tom, is it just says some resources and it's just that.
Oh, it doesn't show the resources themselves?
No.
Well, let me try it again.
Okay.
Hold on. Let's go to chat.
Yeah, this must be in how someone configured this Zoom, because every other Zoom I've been on, the messages are all saved. And then you have the option of downloading them at the end. But it's not here.
Well, this says, I'm looking, it says send chat to everyone.
I'm saying it's probably not your fault. It's the way the chat's been configured.
I don't know. Let me see. Format.
So did you put anything in? Because nothing's shown up.
I put them in at the beginning of the.
No, the beginning is gone. I have no idea where it went.
I'm looking at it and I can see it. Hold on, let me.
Yeah, if you could try sending it again, it might have gone out before people joined.
Well, right now, this is interesting. I can't see how to send another chat to somebody. I see up in front some resources and then.
No, at the bottom in the chat, there should be 2 and it's by default everyone.
Yeah, I'm saying to everyone.
And just type the message there.
Okay.
And as soon as you hit enter, it'll be sent. Yeah, someone just put in copy paste.
Yeah, well, that's what I did to get it in the first place. But what I'm not seeing here is how I can start another chat. You to everyone.
No, the only thing you can do is put in text message. I don't know.
Oh, you can't put in this is a copy paste of text.
No, the word copy / paste in letters showed up.
Oh, yeah, somebody else did that.
Here's a test showed up.
I'll tell you what, I'll send this list. I'll send the list to Alvin and maybe he can distribute it. But it has stuff on Sonatus, Harmon with those distributed subs and all of the articles. Yeah, I did another copy paste and it did the same thing again, but in the same spot. To everyone. Send chat to everyone. All right, I'm
No, at the bottom it says to everyone, type message here. Just type the message.
It's a link.
You can't do a link, I don't think.
That's probably the problem.
yeah, let's see. Format, emojis. Oh, messages have a limit of 1,000 characters and it's in red. That's what it is.
Oh, there it is. Something popped up.
That's from Nick.
Wow.
I sent a link to the tinfoil book.
Oh, thank you.
So you can cut and paste a link, but there may be limitations on the link.
Give me 1 second. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to break this down into smaller characters. And let me go to the Zoom.
It is ironic that Zoom can handle gigabytes and gigabytes of video, but 1,000 characters is all you get for text.
So while we're searching around, I couldn't make it at the beginning of the meeting, but I had a question. Friend of mine is starting to experience difficulties hearing, he's an audiophile, and he asked his audiologist for hearing aids that would deliver him a best quality musical sound from classical music and other orchestral performances. The audiologist didn't know how to respond, and the response was, I help people hear each other.
There's
Okay.
actually a friend of mine that is down in Texas that has gone working with his audiologist and has very good audiophile grade hearing aids at this point. I'll see if I can get who did it, and I'll put it in I'll send it to somebody to send it to get for
Yeah,
the
just
chat or
send it
whatever.
to Alvin if you can.
Okay, we'll do. I can do that.
No,
Yeah, I've
I,
run into a similar situation where I'm running not my ears, but I have a dear friend who tries to use online stuff. She is extremely hard of hearing. And of course, with hearing aids poked in her ears and then cans on top of it, it becomes very awkward for her.
I think
And-
these new ones are actually Bluetooth.
Yeah, well, yeah, the new ones are Bluetooth, but then she is in a literal closet of space in a two-person elder care facility. So she has very little room for anything. And I'm looking actually at bone conduction stuff. And also, in case nobody's aware of it, Etymotic has been bought out by Westone.
Yeah.
And Westone is a long-term earphone and hearing aid manufacturer. And Etymotic, of course, has quite a wide line of in-ear type earphone systems. Whether they will help somebody who has hearing difficulties or has degradation in their sensitivity or their frequency response, that becomes another game entirely. And unfortunately, most audiologists give up around 8 kilohertz if they go that high. They're more focused on
Testing doesn't go beyond that. And
yeah, can you hear
which-
speech? And that's what they're looking at, is they want to be able to have people communicate by speech. They don't really concern themselves with musical performance.
by the way, I just put another message out there that is short and it doesn't have the red warning. Can anybody see those links now?
See, an Apple is advertising hear aid
I
function
can't
with
see
their
it.
earphones.
No,
see it?
it did not come through.
All right.
Is
Tom,
it
just
sent to
listen.
everyone?
Yeah, Tom, just do a test that says Tom or test or something. See what that is.
Pardon?
Could you just send a test with one word just to see whether anything comes through?
Okay.
So you clicked on messaging chat. You should,
Right.
so you see the message from JS, Apple is advertising.
And then, yeah, then it says type message here below everyone.
So type the message, don't paste it, actually type the letters in your keyboard.
All right. Let me delete this. And to everyone. Okay, did anybody get one that says test?
No.
No,
Nope.
Wow.
No.
I seem to have everything.
You have been
doesn't like-
denied, Tom.
It doesn't like me.
Can
Yeah,
someone
it
else
said
who can see
everyone
it
and I
copy
just
paste
typed in
it?
test and I hit test and hit enter.
No, it's not here.
All righty, well,
Mystery.
failure.
Boop, boop, boop,
I will
boop,
send
boop,
a
boop.
list of, I will send that list to Alvin and maybe he can distribute it to you guys. Unless there's some other way I can get it to you.
You know, looking at it at the very bottom, it says type message here. And then over on the lower right, there's a little control enter to send. And then on the left, as I look at it, there is a format, an
There it
emoji,
is.
and then there's a file.
Oh, your
Entrance.
test came through.
Yeah, my bad. I was just hitting enter. I need to hit control enter. So give me 1 second and I will.
So does bone conduction depend on the hearing mechanism that usually degrades with age?
Yes.
Okay, guys.
A
Can you
mixed
see that?
bag.
There you go.
There's your, yeah, it's working.
Oh yeah, I can see it.
All right, now what I'm gonna do, that's only partly because I did get the error message before I had too many. I'm gonna get the rest of them and resend a second one. So go ahead and do your conversations while I do that.
Why don't you still send it to Alvin so he can make it available maybe on the website?
Okay, I will do that as well.
So bone conduction bypasses the middle ear. So if you've got cochlea damage, which tends to be true for people with older age hearing loss, bone conduction may or may not help you.
So you still have to go through the hairs, the
Yes.
frequency selective hairs in the
Yeah.
brain.
Cochlea is the inner ear. Yeah. My wife is hearing impaired. And so in my forays in audio, I went broke in my first audio company, and my second job was at Berlin Care. My only real job, I guess. And meaning I didn't own the company. And so I worked with a lot of hearing aid companies because in Minnesota, we had a lot of them in those years. So I learned a little bit about hearing. That doesn't make me an acoustician or a hearing aid expert, um, but I do live with a hearing impaired person from birth. The first thing to remember is that what a hearing impaired person's point of view is not probably yours. In that, if you're an audiophile, you're used to listening to, a lot of you probably learned how to listen critically somewhere along the lines. That said, I tell my wife that at a trade show, you can tell a good room in 30 seconds. And believe it or not, with hearing aids, she can too, which is pretty bizarre to me. And I'm not sure I really believe it. Maybe she gets cues from the other people in the room. But don't worry about what's above 80 kilohertz. For that person, that's not their biggest issue. Or 8 kilohertz, I mean 80. But hearing aids have gotten much, much better. And there are adjustments for different kinds of use cases. And hearing aids do have direct transmission from phones and things and bypass some things, and that could probably be useful. So I don't know if I'm saying anything that's really news, but hearing aids have really advanced a lot. So if your friend has old hearing aids, it's worth checking out
No,
newer
he's
ones.
just started to experience slight hearing loss. His audiologist complained that he wasn't giving himself chance to get used to and because he wasn't wearing it all the time.
That's probably fair. That's probably true. I mean, that's true of most. I mean, I remember my wife first started wearing hearing aids because she should have worn them a lot earlier. And I've been married for close to 30 years, so I've been around this situation for a bit. But he's probably correct in that. I'm certainly correct that mostly hearing aids is to communicate, not to enjoy music. But hearing aids have come a long way. He's never, I don't know that he's going to find music experiences particularly better with his hearing aids, because hearing aids are not really optimized for that. And they are, they're optimized for communication first.
I just sent a PDF of all those references to Alvin so he can do whatever he needs with those. Al, I'd like to say one thing. Is it possible that if you could map your hearing deficiencies, instead of try to get music grade hearing aids, you might sit in your listening room and put a correction in the DSP nexus that would match what the hearing aids would do, but just listen with your ears?
Oh, sure. And that's what hearing aids do a lot of times.
In other words,
Not the only thing they
typically,
do, but yes.
you mean boost the high frequencies that are rolling off with age.
Well,
Yeah,
you may have some notches too, but what I'm saying is if you've got high quality speakers and you
yeah.
can map your hearing limitations, you might be better off putting that adjustment in your high quality speakers than trying to go through through hearing aids.
If you've
You
had
could
a hearing test, they should be able to give you your response graph with the offsets, and you could do that as EQ.
But keep in mind that presumes a linear system, and
Yeah.
there's a component to hearing loss, which is distortion. And the classic is confusion between B and P and T. And that really confuses the hearing impaired person.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the sibilance issue, and that's where you get up into the upper frequencies to discriminate. The other thing, John S. pointed out, and he's right, Apple is now selling AirPods which have the capability to modify and respond through. I don't know whether they do it internally or whether it's probably through
He
like an
actually
Apple app.
tried that, and his problem is he doesn't like the earbuds, they fall out. So I was wondering if anyone had over-the-ear traditional headphones that could be.
Dave Griesinger had developed something like that a while back, where he actually inserted a microphone into your ear canal to map the function of your hearing, and then that was translated again through digital magic, basically, into an EQ system and compression system and so forth to handle the signal through headphones once you mated the headphones on your head. I'm not sure what Dave is up to these days. He's not getting any younger like the rest of us, so I haven't heard much from him or about him.
So
But
he didn't do this for a brand name hearing aid company.
not that I know of. Again, you'd have to talk to Dave about it and find out what he had to say. Dave Griesinger is, of course, one of the people behind Lexicon, and he sold it off quite a while back. So he's kind of doing odds and ends stuff, last I heard. And I haven't seen or spoken with him in probably 2 or 3 years now.
And some of the headphone companies, not talking in the ears now, but over the ear types, have certainly experimented with EQ, and I'm not sure if there's any commercialized. I've worked with Odyssey, which looks like Odds for the, in the spelling, in that respect. And I don't know if they have a commercial, if they have that sort of thing commercially or not for sure, um, but that could certainly, it's probably easier to do with headphones than it is to do with an audio system. Most noise, as you get older, most of the noise induced hearing aid, I'm not talking about, or not noise induced hearing loss, tends to be a dip around 6 kilohertz, especially if it was environmentally created as opposed to just you got older. So it might be possible to do some boost in the 6 kilohertz region that most of us would find maybe a little bit
What's the
bright.
source of the noise that attacks that frequency portion?
Oh, it's a lot of it's been industrial. People in the military experience will have it. It's the most common kind of noise-induced hearing loss. Will show up as a dip around 6 kilohertz.
I've got a question for Ken. You said that if somebody has a hearing problem with distortion in the ears, is it reasonable to assume that whether you have hearing aids or external sources, that you would still have that remaining problem, that you can't get rid of that because it's a distortion in the ear?
Well, someone mentioned that the confusion could be due to loss of high frequencies, which distinguishes among those. So it still could be linear. I'm no expert in this.
There's also a loss of dynamic range too. And that's where compression systems can come in and are used in some of the headphone or earphone rather designs for hearing aids, where the actual signal coming in is compressed into a narrower
Oh,
dynamic
that's sort of
range.
like going to a rock concert using earplugs and hearing the sound clearer.
Yeah, well,
that's a good point there, Ken.
Yeah, I'm concerned we're getting off of the subject a little bit. And Tom, I have some questions.
Sure.
Cost, for example, if you can give me a summary of, I mean, obviously the stuff you've done looks great and sounds great, but how much, for example, was the room conditioning modules you have from, I think the company's in Seattle?
No, they're in San Francisco, Sonitus USA. I would say that the cost for the materials, because I did the labor of installing it in the room, the cost for the materials, as I remember, was around $3,200 for all of the treatments.
That's reasonable.
Yeah. I don't remember when we built the house what the cost of the Homosote was, but I'm just going to guess it was like double the cost of a sheet of drywall. I mean, it wasn't outrageous. As far as the cost of the Danville processor, Rich, can you tell us what that's going for nowadays?
Well, Al can do it too, but the basic unit like you have, Tom, right now is $3,000 plus shipping. And then the unit that has the AK-4499EX DAC upgrade is $4,000 plus shipping. So that's from Al. So
As far as the speakers, as you said, Al, I built them, so the cost of the drivers altogether was probably just a couple of $1,000. And if I figure my labor at 10 cents an hour, add another $100,000.
Yeah.
That's cheap, sure, Tom.
And by the way, if you read the articles on the construction, you'll see there's like I built 15 jigs to assemble these speakers because of the crazy shapes. As far as the amplifiers, I bought the Crown Studio Reference and the Macro Reference used, and I probably paid like about $1,000 a piece for them. The two VTV amplifiers that have the Purify amps, the switchy amps, I think they were like $7.99. So there's nothing in here, I mean, outside of my labor, that is like, prohibitively expensive. I can tell you that the having other processors, the Danville processor, Al, block your ears and you don't want to hear this, are woefully underpriced for what they are. They are phenomenal performance for the price. The new DEQX, which I don't know if they're still in business. They said they were going to come out with a new one, and I think it was like $12,000 or $15,000. I don't remember, but and the Danville unit sounds better than any processor I've heard before. So that's about the sum total. There's one other person that has built the egg speakers, a fella out in the Chicago area. And I've had people ask me, will you build a set of those speakers for me? And I said, absolutely not. But I said, well, we're not worried about price. I said, absolutely not.
Right, right.
Yep.
So they're unavailable. Similarly, even how about Advos? Does he manufacture them?
No, he stopped me. I looked at that speaker and this is just my personal opinion. I think the reason why he stopped manufacturing them, the performance of the speaker was very, very good. But how many people want a speaker that looked like the one he built? The one I built now it's more modern. The paint finish was done by a friend of mine that has a body shop, and it's the same black with blue metallic that's on my wife's Buick Verano. And I would not begin to try to do that. And I traded him the painting work on those for rebuilding a set of Heil speakers that he destroyed. And he didn't know what he was getting into, and I didn't know what I was getting into. So it worked out well. I can tell you that without a doubt, because I've had my speakers before this were the Bolin and Graebner RD75s in a dipole configuration with 6 10-inch Peerless CC line woofers on each side in a dipole configuration, and then some subs. And they worked very well in the room I had in Chicago, which was 21 feet wide by 16 feet deep. It was a loft. Behind me, there was no wall, so there was another 16 feet to the other wall. So I could get them out in the room, and the back reflection, the back wave off the dipoles would hit that vaulted ceiling and go back. So I didn't have a lot of early reflections, and they sounded really good. I took those when I moved to Maryland and put them in a regular room, and they just didn't work. I just couldn't get them far. In order to get them far enough into the room, they would have been headphones. So basically, I decided I needed a point source speaker and I needed room treatments, which is what I did. I'm very happy with it. I'm not, saying that dipoles are not great. They can work great given the right room and the right treatments. But for me and for what I'm looking for this inner detail, the dynamic range, the sense of texture, this setup works incredibly well for me. A lot of people have come in there, love it. There have been some people that come in and say, oh, it sounds too detailed. Well, I go to live music, it sounds pretty detailed.
Have you compared it to high quality headphones?
I have a set of Etymotic ER4Ss, and I do listen to those. I like the sound, but it doesn't move me like speakers in a room. One of the problems is unless you can calibrate your individual HRTF using in-ear headphones, it just gives you the sound comes from in the middle of your head. You don't get the sense of placement that you get with speakers. There's a lot of work, by the way. I predicted, it was about 15 years ago, I made a stupid prediction, like a lot of them that I do. I predicted that within 5 years, HRTF would be so refined that you wouldn't need speakers anymore. Well, I think maybe another 20 years that might happen. But there is some work being done right now. I think Sony has done some work and some other people have done some work where you can map your individual HRTF. And if you can do that and then run it through processing, you should get incredibly good results. You may still need something for bass because of the bone conduction in the bass, but it should eliminate all the room problems, should do wonderful things, but you really need to map your HRTF to do that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on the Etymotics units. I use those when I've done live recording. The only real drawback I've found is, you probably have too, is the bass response just isn't impressive. I mean,
Correct.
it's there, but you don't feel it, obviously, because the diaphragms are smaller than your little fingernail.
The rest of the frequency range is great. But again, it wasn't even so much the bass response, because I've got enough subwoofers I could sit on a subwoofer if I wanted to. But the I'm not talking about constipation now. The having no HRTF and having the sound be so different from what I hear at live recordings or even in my room has made me shy away from headphones. Like I said, that may change in the future, but for now, I like the setup I have right now. It's very, very high resolution. I mean, people come into the house and a typical response I get is, "Oh my God, I never heard that in the music before." They're hearing stuff coming out, and stuff that's clear and clean that they have never heard before. And that to me is very important, because it really helps me communicate with all the different artists that are out there, whether it's instrumental or vocal or whatever.
How does this compare with
Sounds
a
better
live
than
performance?
live music.
Wait, one at a time, please.
Your system sounds better than live music.
That was my question.
Well, I can tell you that this system and many systems I've heard sound a lot better than many of the live performances, like with rock groups and stuff. I mean, they just don't know what they're doing. The last time I heard a good live performance that was amplified, I heard Roger Waters down in DC do The Wall. And whoever did that did a masterful job. It sounded very good.
Alvin and I were pursuing an expert in England, a rock musician, who's made a whole slew of YouTube videos proving that most live performances are pre-recorded or auto-tuned or frequency corrected, including some of the biggest names in music.
Could very well be. I mean, you look at a lot of these performers.
By the way, it's now 4:00.
Are lip syncing. So any other questions on this system or my tortuous path that I took to get here?
Yeah, when you talked about the Homosot wall, I was wondering, I had used a similar situation for the ceiling, which I have a studio I custom built in my basement using cinder block walls that are sand filled, et cetera, et cetera. I went a little probably overboard in some areas, but I got some advice from, at the time, BB&N folks, to use a sheet of lead, about 1/16 of an inch thick.
Yeah, we referred that before many times.
Maybe some people haven't, David. Why don't you just clam up a little?
One
Sheath.
thing
And they recommended 2 layers of wallboard and a layer
Yeah.
of 16-inch lead.
Yeah,
And it
constrained
works very
layer.
well.
Yeah. One thing that I will say that I found out through all the years I've been doing this is that getting rid of stored energy anywhere in the system, anywhere. If you have stored energy, it smears the sounds, runs on the details, does very bad things. So whatever you can do to get rid of stored energy, and like you were talking about, Alan, constrained layer, which absorbs a lot of the energy, doesn't send it back. So yes, I agree with you on that.
David,
Stored
I
energy.
apologize for being curt. It was not a proper response, and I apologize for it.
Thank you.
Does stored energy mean reflected energy?
It means delayed energy. For example, if you have a speaker that for some reason has a high Q resonance somewhere, that energy will come out a little bit delayed.
Oh.
And you have, I'm not big on electronic components, but in some cases, if you had, let's say, capacitors that had dielectric absorption, and they might feed some of the electrons back out after the signal should have gone through.
Well, I mean, capacitors, inductors
Yeah.
are the technology used for delay.
Yeah, well, but there's a lot of places, even like turntables. Somebody was talking about turntable mats and how they can absorb some of the reflected energy. I don't worry about that because I do everything digital. But any place in the chain where energy can be stored so that it will step on some following sounds that are coming through will tend to affect, in my opinion, the sense of space and the sense of clarity.
That's right on the mark, Tom, because you pointed out those ceiling panels are separated from the ceiling by about 2 to 4 inches. That's exactly what they're doing. They're capturing, the sound doesn't get stopped by that panel. It goes through it in some cases on the lower frequencies. And that delay, when it hits the ceiling, it bounces back right into the panel and it damps it out.
Yeah, that is such, I found that such an important thing, is not having anything come out of time sequence. And where things come out of time sequence, sometimes a larger signal can step on a smaller signal. I've seen that in optics as well, where if you have dispersion and internal dispersion in optics, let's say you have a bunch of point sources, like you're looking at stars, what happens, instead of getting this nice sort of square wave from the starlight, you get a bell-shaped thing, and it steps on the other stars, and now you can't see them. So that happens everywhere. Stored energy can be a problem in video and audio. I mean, everywhere.
So I think there's a kind of a related topic a little bit with that, and that is the need for appropriate time alignments.
Yes.
And you see this a lot, especially with woofers. And what happens is your woofer will have something they'll call phase, which is kind of delay, except that it makes an assumption that the woofer is closer than the mains. And you basically don't have a control that says negative time. I mean, because we don't have flux capacitors, and most of us don't have room for the DeLorean in our listening room. So one of the things that I do think is really important is, if you're integrating woofers, is that in some cases you're going to delay your mains, in some cases you can delay your woofers. But subjectively, when you're time aligned with woofers, the woofers kind of disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the psychological effect. But very oftentimes, the thing that you're actually delaying, it isn't just letting your mains go free and adding some woofers. Sometimes the only thing you really have to do in your mains is to delay your mains, because maybe your mains are in such a case. Usually your mains might be more front and center, and maybe you're trying to hide the woofers because they're ugly and they're just in a spot that are further away. So, so that's something I think you do want to do. It's very, very easy to do in a DSP system. It's not particularly easy at all to do in a non-DSP system because delay is essentially free. It's just a memory. In the Nexus, for instance, there are controls on it where you can adjust every single channel in 5 microsecond increments to 21 milliseconds. 21 milliseconds is roughly 21 feet. If you need more than that, you could still do it. But that's a pretty big listening room.
One thing, yeah, one thing I would say from a practical standpoint, when you do that time alignment and when you do the integration of the various woofers properly with the mains, I had a person come from the New Jersey Audio Society and listen to the system, and he writes for another magazine, and before he left, he said, "Now I know what bass is supposed to sound like," and to me that said it all. It sounded very real, no overhang. It integrated properly with the mids and the highs. So time alignment and placement and all that, everything is important. And the ability to have a processor that can give you all of those controls, to me, is just absolutely fundamental.
We have had meetings at the home of, I think it's Richard, is it Goldmark, who converted a garage into a listening room with lots of acoustics treatments. Has anyone heard both of these locations to compare?
You mean Richard Goldwater?
Goldwater, yes.
I don't think it was a garage that he converted. I think it was a room he added onto his house.
Oh, okay.
Well, I know I am in Philadelphia a long way from you guys, but if any of you do want to come down, you are welcome to come down. The Perazella Airbnb has very good room rates, I've heard, if you want to stay over. So if any of you want to do that, I would be more than happy to host you. And I think you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about in terms of what music can do to your emotions once you get things balanced and clear and distinguished from each other. To me, I mean, every night I'm in here every night listening for at least an hour. Just music just goes right in, and things that I couldn't listen to before that were very harsh and everything are not. Things that were all mixed together are now separated. So I'm just enjoying it. I don't know if everybody would enjoy it the same way, but I enjoy it a lot.
And I'll just say this, that means I must have done an okay job for Tom's system.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, with that, it's been 2 hours and 15 minutes. If there's any more urgent questions, I think we should probably call the Zoom to a close. More questions?
I just want to go ahead and apologize to everybody online for my outburst. It was uncalled for, and it certainly wasn't appropriate for this group. My apologies to everyone, okay?
Well, Alan, when you come down, I'm going to make sure I turn the bass up by about 40 dB to beat you with
it. Anyone else?
I would just like to say
I've had
that
my hand up for a while. Can I slip a quick one in?
If it's quick, Gary.
Okay, I have had times when I just didn't like my music and times when it burst out in wonderful tones. And I wonder if it has to do with the electrical current coming into my home and if Tom believes in power conditioners.
If you have a few minutes, I would give you again an opinion. I think if you have good equipment, the power supplies in the equipment should basically let the acoustical parts of the equipment not see the line. I have a test I do with, I take one of my Crown macro references, strap it, turn it into a 120 volt DC source, and I have a noise signal generator that I go in there, and I run the equipment off of that. That tells me right away whether any of the line perturbations are going to get through to the audio channel. And I can tell you, if you've got a decent power supply, it should not happen. If you don't have a decent power supply, a power conditioner, in my opinion, is a crutch It will help to some degree, but none of the power conditioners that I have seen have the low impedance of the power line that's coming in from Pepco into my house. So rule number one is have good power supplies. If you don't, a power conditioner may help, but I don't think it's the proper way to go.
So many different pieces of equipment with transformers in them. You're depending on them all being good, right?
Well, I'll be coming out with an article probably sometime later next year. I'm in the middle of photographing the stuff right now.
I hosted a company that develops power conditioning for high-end customers. It was the equipment I saw at a trade show stood about 6 feet high, in a
Yep.
huge rack. And the president of the company, who I brought in as a featured speaker in a committee I chair on energy management, said there's really no substitute for centralized power conditioning, and he sells it to the rich and famous.
Yeah, well, if you want something that big and spend that much money, I would agree. But it's a lot easier to build a piece of equipment with the right power supplies. And
Well,
nothing.
that's true, but traditionally U.S. manufacturers have always cut corners on power
Yes.
supply.
Yes.
I ran a meeting where one of the very high-end refrigerator makers, Sub-Zero, we're talking about susceptibility to RF interference. And the guy from Sub-Zero said that that's required in Europe, but he said we don't bother putting the parts in the US. We save a few dollars because the FCC doesn't require it.
Well, like I said, I'm in the middle of doing an article right now on a low voltage power supply filter to go between switch mode power supply wall warts and equipment, and I have measurements and everything, and that will be coming out hopefully later next year.
Okay, is that it?
One quick question. I just
Gotta be
wanted to,
quick.
it's not a question, it's a comment. Someone mentioned that I'd be pleased to be a guest on a future meeting. I guess that's
Great.
all I'm saying.
Right.
Just contact me if you're interested.
Thank you. And you will be contacted.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll see you at the next BAS meeting in January. Thank you very much for
Have
coming.
good holidays, folks.
Happy holidays, everybody.
No.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.